harsh curse words that were used that are never used in any movie. I don't think there's ever been more cursing in one movie than in Saturday Night Fever.
Saturday Night Fever sold a white polyester suit to the whole world. Yet that suit was supposed to be black, and that is the smallest secret here. Picture the biggest movie soundtrack ever made. Written over one rushed weekend by a band that had no clue what the film was even about. The dancers on set were moving to the wrong songs. The main character came from a magazine article that was completely faked. And the famous strut down the street? Travolta nearly refused to do it. 15 facts, and each one gets stranger.
After these schoolrooms, I wouldn't paint my wife's ass purple.
What color is it now?
You want to know what color my wife's ass is?
You brung it up?
Fact 1. The soundtrack was written. In one weekend, it all starts with who actually wrote the music. By the time the Bee Gees were brought on board, most of the movie had already been filmed. Let that sink in. The band was only moderately successful at that point, and they were deep into work on their own album. They had no idea what the movie's story was even about. Producer Robert Stigwood reached out, and over a single weekend, the brothers wrote several brand new songs and dug up some material they already had lying around. One of those songs was Staying Alive, which got turned into a quick demo for the film's now legendary opening sequence. That walk down the street, the paint can swinging, the whole vibe of it, all of that came from a weekend rush job. Here is the part that everyone misses. Since the famous songs did not exist yet during filming, what were the actors dancing to? According to John Travolta himself, the dance scenes on set were shot to the sounds of Boz Scaggs and Stevie Wonder. The cast was grooving to completely different music, and the Bee Gees tracks were dropped in later. The whole soundtrack went on to sell more than 15 million copies in the United States alone, and it stayed the best-selling soundtrack ever made for about 15 years, until The Bodyguard finally beat it. Not bad for a weekend of work. Fact 2. A taxi ride and a suit. Almost did not happen. The woman dancing beside him got there by pure luck. Stephanie was Tony's dance partner, and casting her was no easy task. Hundreds of women auditioned. None of them felt right. The filmmakers were still searching with no end in sight. Meanwhile, 32-year-old Karen Lynn Gorney was hungry for her big break. Then, out of nowhere, fate stepped in. One day, she shared a taxi with a complete stranger who happened to be the nephew of producer Robert Stigwood. When the stranger mentioned his uncle was making a movie, Gorney jokingly fired back asking if she was in it, a line she used to toss out any time she heard about a new film. The nephew was amused enough to pass her name along. That single cab ride led to the audition that landed her one of the most memorable roles of the decade. Think about how thin that thread was. A different taxi, a different day, and someone else is dancing in that movie. The whole thing nearly came down to chance. One person's stubborn argument changed pop culture forever. Fact 3. The lead character was completely made up. A magazine writer kicked this whole thing off, and he was making most of it up. In June of 1976, New York Magazine ran a piece called Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night. It was written by a British journalist named Nick Cohn. The article zoomed in on a young guy named Vincent, supposedly the best dancer in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, the king of the local club scene. Readers ate it up. The whole thing felt raw and real, like a window into a world nobody outside Brooklyn had ever seen. But here's the catch. Years later, Cohn admitted Vincent was completely fake. He just made him up. Cohn had only recently moved to Brooklyn and barely knew the neighborhood or the people in it. So where did Vincent come from? Cohn modeled him after a mod he used to know back in London during the 1960s. a British kid from a decade earlier became the blueprint for the most famous Brooklyn dancer in movie history. The character of Tony Manero, the role that made Travolta a legend, was built on a person who never existed. And the magazine article that started it all was, in large part, fiction dressed up as a true story. Fact 4. Travolta was already a star. Travolta was already famous before any of this, just not the way you think. Saturday Night Fever shot John Travolta straight into movie stardom, but he was already a household name. He had been playing Vinnie Barbarino, the wisecracking, troublemaking teen on the hit sitcom Welcome Back, Kotter. Audiences loved him for his humor and that goofy catchphrase about a rubber hose. Teenage girls were obsessed with him. So once word got out that Travolta was shooting on the streets of Brooklyn, the place turned into chaos. Thousands of fans flooded the area. Co-star Donna Pescow said filming became a nightmare because fans kept rushing toward Travolta nonstop. It got so bad that the crew had to start shooting at random hours, often at the crack of dawn, just to get a clean shot. Director John Badham even had the team print fake call sheets to throw people off. And here is something most fans never realize. Travolta had to shed a lot of weight for this role, somewhere between 20 and 30 pounds, depending on who you ask, to go from the slightly soft Barbarino into the lean dancing machine that was Tony Manero. His trainer was the same man who whipped Sylvester Stallone into shape for the original Rocky. Travolta was juggling a hit TV show and this movie at the same time, running on almost no sleep. And that was just the beginning of what he was carrying. Fact 5. That dance floor sold for over $1 million. The dance floor itself became worth a small fortune. The movie was filmed at a real club called the 2001 Odyssey Disco in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. But the production team added their own touch. A $15,000 dance floor lit up with multicolored lights designed to flash in rhythm with the music. That glowing floor became one of the most iconic images in film history. The club shut down in 2005, but a former employee named Vito Bruno bought the floor before it could disappear. Then, in June of 2017, Bruno put the famous floor up for auction. An anonymous buyer scooped it up for $1.2 million. Think about that. A dance floor that cost $15,000 to build sold decades later for over $1 million. The crazy part is, it spent years sitting in a club that most people had forgotten about. That floor outlived the disco, outlived the era, and turned into one of the most valuable movie props ever sold. And the chaos behind the scenes did not stop at the dance floor. Fact 6. The White Castle workers were real. Some of the most natural reactions in the film were completely real. In the quick scene where Tony, his crew, and Stephanie are loudly eating at White Castle, the employees behind the counter were not actors. They were the actual restaurant staff. The director told them to just carry on like it was a normal day, while he told the cast to cut loose and catch the workers off guard. The shot that made the final cut looks like a reaction to Joey climbing onto the table and barking like a dog. But according to director John Badham, the real shock came from something far more outrageous. Paul Pape, who played Double J, dropped his pants and mooned the entire White Castle staff. That stunned look on those workers' faces? 100% genuine. They had no clue what was coming. This was the kind of loose, improvised energy Badham wanted, and it shows up all over the movie. What most people don't realize is that this style of catching people off guard was used again later in the film, with even bigger emotional stakes. But before we get there, the story behind the camera takes a heartbreaking turn. Fact 7. Travolta was grieving through filming off the set. Travolta was living through the worst stretch of his life. While working on the TV movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, Travolta fell in love with his co-star Diana Hyland, who actually played his mother in that film. There was an 18-year age gap between them. The two started a relationship that lasted 6 months. Sadly, Hyland was battling breast cancer. She passed away at just 41 years old, after filming only 4 episodes of her new show, 8 is Enough. Here is the part that hits hard. Hyland was the one who had encouraged Travolta to take the Saturday Night Fever role in the first place. She wanted him to keep going with the film even as she was fading. Travolta briefly left the set and flew to Los Angeles to be by her side during her final moments, then had to return and finish the movie while grieving. So when you watch Tony Manero strut across that screen full of swagger and confidence, remember, the man playing him was quietly carrying something devastating. And against all logic, he poured that pain into one of the most electric performances ever filmed. The energy you see was real, even if the joy was an act. Fact 8. The tango hustle was an accident. The most iconic dance in the rehearsal scenes happened completely by accident. About 1 hour into the film, Tony and Stephanie run through a routine that looks like a blend of the tango and the hustle. Here is the twist you didn't see coming. That sequence was improvised on the spot because the movie's choreographer was unexpectedly absent on the day of filming. There were no planned steps, nothing. John Travolta and Karen Lynn Gorney had to invent something right there on the floor. They cooked up a move they jokingly called the tango hustle. It made it into the final movie, though it never really caught on as a real dance craze. Think about that. One of the most watched routines in the film exists only because someone did not show up to work. And the music problems went even deeper. Fact 9. A song got yanked after filming the music headaches almost wrecked an entire scene. For another rehearsal scene, Badham originally used the Boz Scaggs song Low Down. He went so far as to shoot the entire scene, dialogue and all, with that song playing in the background. That is usually a big mistake, and here is why. Right after they wrapped, Skaggs's people reached out and said the song was off the table, because Skaggs was thinking of doing his own disco project. The crew was stuck. Composer David Shire had to write brand new instrumental music that matched the exact dance steps already filmed. He pulled it off, but his track never even made it onto the soundtrack album. So much of this movie was held together with last-minute saves. Fact 10. The bridge scene was improvised. Some of the rawest moments on the bridge were never even scripted. Staten Islanders take real pride in the fact that some of the film's most memorable moments were shot on the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. But much of what ended up on screen was not in the script at all. The actors improvised a big chunk of the bridge scene. Director John Badham deliberately kept Donna Pescow, who played Annette, in the dark about a key moment. So her terrified screams and tears were completely genuine. She was not acting. She genuinely did not know what was coming, and the fear you see is real. This was the same trick Badham pulled at the White Castle, catching people off guard to get something authentic. And it worked. That scene carries a weight that careful planning could never have created. Fact 11. The set was attacked during filming. The danger went way beyond a tricky bridge stunt. The production faced threats far scarier than anything in the script. Local gangs harassed the crew over use of the filming locations, and at one point, the production was even firebombed. Picture that. A film crew trying to shoot a dance movie while dodging real-world hostility on the streets of Brooklyn. This was not a smooth, safe Hollywood shoot. It was a fight to get the movie made at all. The team also dealt with thousands of fans swarming locations, forcing those dawn shoots and fake call sheets we talked about earlier. Every single day brought a new obstacle, and somehow the movie kept moving forward. And get this, the budget was tiny by Hollywood standards, around $3.5 million, which meant there was almost no money to throw at problems. There was no backup plan, no deep pockets to smooth things over. When a location turned hostile, the crew could not just pack up and rebuild a fancy set somewhere safe. They had to push through it. That low budget is also why most of the cast were unknowns pulled from the New York theater scene. So you had a group of mostly first-time movie actors, a stretched thin crew, and a neighborhood that did not always want them there. The pressure was enormous, and you can almost feel that raw, on-edge energy bleeding into the final film. Fact 12. Travolta almost did not do the strut. Here is the bonus everyone waits for, and it almost did not happen. John Travolta's famous strut down 86th Street is one of the film's most unforgettable moments, but he almost did not film it himself. The original plan was to use a stand-in and capture only the lower half of the body. When Travolta saw that early footage, he was not impressed at all. He insisted on doing it himself. And honestly, thank goodness he did. That single decision gave us one of the most copied opening sequences in movie history. Think about how strange that choice almost was. The director's team figured nobody would notice if a random double handled the walking, since you would only see legs and feet anyway. But Travolta understood something they did not. The way a person carries themselves, the rhythm of their steps, the attitude in their hips. That is not something you can fake with a stranger's body. He knew the walk was the character, so he fought for it. And that opening, with the paint can swinging and the confident strut, became the thing people imitated for decades. It is on posters, in parodies, in tributes all over the world. One stubborn actor refusing to let a double do his job is the only reason that iconic image exists at all. Fact 13. A body double faked the shoe shot. Not everything in that walk is what it seems. Here is a small confession most fans never catch. Not every close-up in that strut sequence is actually Travolta. When Tony lifts his foot to compare his shoe to one in a store window, that was a body double doing the work. Apparently, even a disco king has his limits. So the next time you watch that opening, know that the foot you are looking at might not belong to the star at all. And that is the funny part about movie magic. The same actor who fought tooth and nail to do his own walking was perfectly fine, letting someone else handle a quick shoe shot. It shows you how carefully these famous scenes are stitched together from pieces. A bit of him here, a bit of a double there, all cut so smoothly that audiences have believed it was one continuous performance for decades. That tiny store window moment feels completely natural, yet it is a little trick hiding in plain sight. Hollywood is full of these seams, and most people never notice them. Once you know to look for that shoe shot, though, you can never quite unsee it. It is proof that even the most legendary movie moments are part performance and part clever editing. Fact 14. The camera nearly ruined his hardest work. The biggest betrayal came from the people filming him. There is one more sting in this story. When Travolta later learned that his big solo dance had been shot mostly from the waist up, cutting out all the hip and leg movement he had trained so hard to perfect, he was furious. He had spent months becoming a dancer, and the camera nearly threw all of that away. Looking back, that was the moment he started fighting for control over how his work was shown. And it changed how he approached every role that came after. He never wanted that kind of work to be wasted again, so from then on, he paid close attention to how directors framed his dancing. That fight was bigger than one scene. It was about respect for the months of sweat he had put in. And honestly, it makes the footage we did get even more impressive when you remember how much of his effort The camera left on the cutting room floor. Fact 15. The title itself was almost different. Even the name on the poster was up for grabs. Here is a detail that surprises almost everyone. The movie was nearly called something else entirely. Early on, the project was simply going under the working title Saturday Night. But after the Bee Gees wrote and submitted their song Night Fever for the soundtrack, they told producer Robert Stigwood they did not like that plain title at all. They wanted something with more punch. It was right after that conversation that the now iconic name Saturday Night Fever was locked in. Stop and think about that for a second. One of the most famous movie titles in history exists because a band did not like the sound of a shorter version. The word fever came straight out of their own song. So the title, the soundtrack, and the legacy all trace back to the same weekend of music. Strip out that one comment from the band, and the whole thing might have gone out into the world under a forgettable name. That is how close some of the most legendary parts of this film came to never existing the way we know them. So here is the part where we talk straight to you. So the real question is this: did this movie capture something real about that era? Or did it create the legend it pretended to document? You decide. If this took you back, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one.